The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of Wallace, Idaho's only general store, and Bianca Laurent stepped down onto the dusty street with her worn leather trunk, not knowing that the whispers about her strange voice would follow her everywhere she went for the next 6 months. The mountain town of Wallace sat nestled in the Silver Valley, surrounded by pine-covered peaks that reminded Bianca achingly of home, though these American mountains were wilder and more rugged than anything in the French Alps. It was 1882, and she had traveled across an ocean and half a continent to reach this rough mining settlement where her late uncle had left her a small boarding house. The September air carried the scent of wood smoke and horse leather, and everywhere she looked, men in dusty clothes and wide-brimmed hats stared at her with curiosity that bordered on suspicion. "Excuse me, monsieur," she said to the stagecoach driver as he handed down her trunk. "Can you tell me where I might find the boarding house on Cedar Street?" The driver jerked his thumb toward the eastern edge of town without meeting her eyes. "Up yonder, past the saloon. Can't miss it." Bianca thanked him in her accented English, dragging her trunk across the wooden sidewalk. She was 22 years old, dark-haired and dark-eyed, with the kind of Mediterranean features that made her stand out among the predominantly Irish and German miners who populated Wallace. Her dress was practical but unmistakably foreign in its cut, and the scarf she wore tied around her hair was embroidered with patterns from her mother's village in Provence. The boarding house was a 2-story wooden structure that had seen better days. Paint peeled from its clapboard siding, and the front porch sagged slightly on one side. But it was hers now, the only inheritance her uncle had possessed when fever took him 3 months ago. The lawyer's letter had been clear. She could sell it or run it, but either way, she needed to be here in person to claim it. Bianca had chosen to run it. There was nothing left for her in France after her parents died, and the small farming village where she had grown up held only memories of poverty and limited prospects for an unmarried woman with no dowry. She pushed open the front door and found the interior dusty, but structurally sound. 4 rooms upstairs for boarders, a kitchen and dining area on the main floor, and a small room behind the stairs where she assumed her uncle had slept. She would make it work. She had to. The next morning, Bianca walked to the general store to purchase supplies. The proprietor, a heavy-set man with mutton-chop whiskers, watched her approach the counter with barely concealed skepticism. "I need flour, sugar, coffee, and lamp oil," Bianca said carefully, pronouncing each word as clearly as she could manage. Her English was functional but heavily accented, the French vowels and rhythm impossible to shake. "You that Frenchwoman took over old Pierre's place?" the proprietor asked. "I am his niece, yes, Bianca Laurent." "Well, Miss Laurent, we do things American here." "You planning to cook American food in that boarding house, or you going to be serving snails and such?" Heat rose in Bianca's cheeks, but she kept her voice level. "I plan to cook good food that will satisfy hungry men. That is all." Several customers in the store had stopped their shopping to watch the exchange. One of them, a woman in a severe black dress, sniffed audibly. "French," she muttered to her companion. "Next thing you know, she'll be bringing all sorts of improper European ways to our decent town." Bianca paid for her supplies without responding and carried them back to the boarding house, her arms aching and her pride bruised. This was not the welcome she had hoped for, but she had survived worse. She would prove herself through hard work. Within a week, she had the boarding house cleaned, aired, and ready for tenants. She posted a notice at the general store advertising rooms and meals, and within 2 days, 3 miners had taken up residence. They paid their rent on time and ate her cooking without complaint, though they rarely spoke to her beyond basic necessities. It was at the community church social 2 weeks after her arrival that the real trouble started. Bianca had been invited by Mrs. Henderson, the minister's wife, who seemed to be the only woman in Wallace willing to give her a chance. The social was held in the churchyard, with tables laden with pies and cakes, and men standing in clusters talking about mine yields and silver prices. Bianca tried to make conversation with a group of younger women near her age, asking about their lives in Wallace and sharing a bit about her journey from France. But her accent seemed to amuse them. "Say that again," one woman said, a blonde named Constance Miller. "Say thoroughly." "Thoroughly," Bianca repeated, knowing her th came out closer to z. The women giggled behind their hands. "It sounds so funny," Constance said. "Like you've got marbles in your mouth." "My English is not perfect," Bianca admitted, feeling her face flush. "But I am learning." "Why did you even come here?" another woman asked. "There's nothing in Wallace for someone like you." "Someone like me," Bianca's voice sharpened despite her best efforts. "You know, foreign, different, you don't understand our ways." Before Bianca could respond, a man's voice cut through the conversation. "Seems to me she understands working hard and making an honest living, which is more than can be said for some folks who spend their days gossiping." Bianca turned to see a tall man in his mid-20s approaching the group. He had the sun-weathered face of someone who spent his days outdoors, dark blonde hair that needed cutting, and pale blue eyes that held both amusement and something else she could not quite identify. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, worn denim trousers, a faded shirt, and a leather vest. His hat hung down his back by its string. The women scattered like startled birds, leaving Bianca standing alone with her rescuer. "I apologize for their rudeness," the man said, pulling off his hat in a gesture of respect. "I am Lucas Irving. I run cattle in the hills south of town, bring them down for sale every few months." "Bianca Laurent," she said, accepting his offered handshake. His hand was calloused and strong, his grip firm but not crushing. "Thank you for speaking up, but I do not need defending." "Did not figure you did," Lucas said with a slight smile, "but I could not stand by and let them treat you that way. My mother raised me better than that." "Your mother is here in Wallace." "No, she passed 5 years back. My father, too. I have been on my own since then, running the ranch they built up in the Montana Territory before moving here." He gestured toward the food tables. "Have you tried the punch, Mrs. Henderson makes it with real lemons, quite a luxury this far from civilization." They walked together toward the refreshment table, and Bianca felt the weight of dozens of eyes following them. "I think you have just made yourself unpopular by associating with me," she said quietly. Lucas shrugged. "I have never much cared what people think. A man or a woman should be judged by their character and their actions, not where they were born or how they talk. That is a generous philosophy. It is a practical one. Half the people in this town came from somewhere else originally. My grandparents were from Scotland. You think they did not face prejudice when they arrived in America?" Bianca sipped her punch, studying Lucas from the corner of her eye. He had an easy way of standing, comfortable in his own skin, and he did not seem to feel the need to fill every silence with words. She found it refreshing after the constant chatter and barely veiled hostility she had faced from others. "How long have you been in Wallace?" she asked. "About 3 years. I was working a cattle drive that came through, and I liked the look of the country. Found some good grazing land that nobody had claimed yet, filed my papers and set up my operation. It is not a big spread, but it is mine." "I understand that feeling," Bianca said. "The boarding house is not much, but it is the first thing I have ever truly owned." Lucas met her eyes and something in his expression softened. "Then we are both trying to build something out here. That is worth respecting." They talked for another hour, Lucas telling her about the rhythms of ranch life and the challenges of working cattle in mountainous terrain, Bianca sharing carefully edited stories of her childhood in France. She did not mention the hunger years after crop failures, or the way her father had drunk away what little money they had, or the shame of being the poorest family in the village. Those stories were not for a first conversation. When the social ended, Lucas offered to walk her back to the boarding house. It is getting dark, and the streets are not always safe for a woman alone. Bianca wanted to refuse on principle, but practicality won out. She had noticed the rough element in Wallace, the miners who spent their pay on whiskey and gambling and looked at decent women with eyes that made her skin crawl. They walked in companionable silence for most of the way, their footsteps echoing on the wooden sidewalks. When they reached her porch, Lucas tipped his hat. "I hope you will not let the small-minded folks run you off," he said. "Wallace needs more people who are willing to work hard and treat others fairly." "I do not plan to go anywhere," Bianca said firmly. "I have nowhere else to go, and I am tired of running." Something flickered in Lucas's eyes, understanding perhaps. "Well then, I suppose I will see you around town." "Yes, I suppose you will." Bianca watched him walk away into the gathering dusk, his long stride eating up the distance, and felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It was not hope exactly, not yet, but it was close. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Bianca cooked and cleaned for her boarders, walked to the general store for supplies despite the whispers and stares, and slowly improved the condition of her property. She scrubbed floors until her hands were raw, patched holes in the walls, and planted a small herb garden behind the house. The work was endless but satisfying. Lucas stopped by every few days, always with some plausible excuse. He needed to check the time since his pocket watch was broken. He was looking for a boarder who owed him money. He wanted to recommend her establishment to some cowboys passing through. Bianca saw through the pretenses, but did not call him out. She looked forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit. One afternoon in late October, Lucas arrived with a load of firewood in his wagon. "Winter comes hard and fast in these mountains," he said, stacking the split logs near her back door. "You will need more than what you have." "I cannot afford to pay you for this," Bianca said, wiping her hands on her apron. She had been scrubbing pots when he arrived, and she was painfully aware of how disheveled she must look. "Did not ask you to pay," Lucas said, continuing his work. "Consider it being neighborly." "But I should pay. I do not want charity." Lucas straightened, fixing her with a direct look. "It is not charity. It is me making sure you do not freeze to death this winter. There is a difference." They stared at each other for a long moment, and Bianca realized they were both stubborn people who did not like accepting help. The recognition made her smile despite herself. "Very well. But you will stay for dinner. I have beef stew cooking and there is fresh bread." "Now who is being neighborly?" Lucas said, but he was smiling too. That dinner was the first of many. Lucas began stopping by most evenings after finishing his work, and they would eat together at Bianca's kitchen table while her boarders took their meals in the dining room. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for their futures, slowly building the kind of friendship that could become something more if given time and space to grow. But not everyone was pleased with their developing relationship. Constance Miller and her friends made it their mission to remind Bianca at every opportunity that she was not welcome in Wallace. At the general store, they would fall silent when she entered, then resume their conversation in pointed whispers. At church, they sat as far from her as possible. When she walked down the street, they crossed to the other side. The breaking point came in early November, when Bianca arrived at the mercantile to find Constance holding court near the front counter, surrounded by her usual circle of admirers. "I just think it is shameful," Constance was saying in a voice clearly meant to carry. "A decent American man like Lucas Irving wasting his time with some foreign woman who can barely speak proper English. My mother says she probably lured him in with her European wiles." Bianca's hands clenched around her shopping basket, but she continued toward the counter, determined to conduct her business with dignity. "And that accent," another woman chimed in, "like nails on a chalkboard. I do not know how anyone can stand to listen to it. She probably does not even cook real American food. I heard French people eat horse meat." Bianca set her basket on the counter with more force than necessary. "I will take 2 pounds of coffee, a sack of flour, and a pound of butter," she said to the proprietor, her accent perhaps thicker than usual due to her agitation. The man filled her order in uncomfortable silence, while Constance's group continued their commentary, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "I am just saying, Lucas could do so much better. There are plenty of good Christian women right here in Wallace who would make him a proper wife. Women who understand American ways and would not embarrass him in front of his friends." Bianca paid for her purchases and turned to leave, intending to ignore the provocation. But as she passed Constance's group, one of the women deliberately shifted position, causing Bianca to stumble. Her basket tilted and the butter went sliding across the floor. "Oh my," Constance said with false sweetness, "how clumsy, but I suppose coordination is different in France." The women laughed, and something inside Bianca snapped. She had endured weeks of insults and mockery, had held her tongue and tried to be the bigger person, but her patience had limits. "You are right," Bianca said, straightening to her full height and meeting Constance's eyes directly. "Things are different in France. For example, we are taught that jealousy is an ugly emotion that makes a woman small and bitter. We are also taught that true refinement comes from how one treats others, particularly those who are different or struggling. By those standards, mademoiselle, you are the foreign one here, not me." The laughter died. Constance's face flushed an ugly red. "How dare you speak to me that way? I am from a good family. My father is on the town council." "And my father was a drunk who could not keep his family fed," Bianca said flatly. "But I learned more about dignity and hard work from my mother, who had nothing, than you have learned from all your advantages. Now please excuse me. I have a business to run." She retrieved her butter from the floor, placed it back in her basket, and walked out of the store with her head high. But once she was back in her boarding house with the door closed, she allowed herself to shake. She had made an enemy today, a powerful one with social connections. In a small town like Wallace, that could be dangerous, but she could not bring herself to regret her words. There was only so much a person could take. That evening, when Lucas arrived for dinner, he took one look at her face and asked what was wrong. Bianca tried to brush it off, but he was persistent, and eventually she told him everything. Lucas listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I am sorry," he finally said. "I should have realized my attention would make things harder for you." "No," Bianca said quickly. "You have been the only good thing about coming to Wallace. Please do not apologize for that. Constance Miller has been pursuing me since I arrived in town," Lucas said bluntly. "I have made it clear I am not interested, but she does not take rejection well. This is not really about you being French. It is about you being someone I actually want to spend time with." "That makes it worse, not better," Bianca pointed out. "Now she has a personal reason to hate me. She had no right to treat you that way regardless of her reasons." Lucas reached across the table and took Bianca's hand, the first time he had touched her so deliberately. His skin was warm and rough against hers. "You deserve better than this. I am getting used to it. You should not have to get used to it. You should be welcomed and valued." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "When you speak, with your accent and your different way of phrasing things, do you know what I hear?" Bianca shook her head, not trusting her voice. "I hear someone who crossed an ocean alone, who learned a new language, who is building a life from nothing in a place that has not made it easy. I hear courage and determination. I hear someone who refuses to give up no matter how hard things get." He squeezed her hand gently. "You sound like home to me, Bianca. The home I have been trying to build for myself out here. The home I have been lonely for without even realizing it." Tears pricked at Bianca's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her that way, had ever seen her struggles as strengths rather than weaknesses. "Lucas," she whispered, his name soft on her tongue with its French pronunciation. "I know we have only known each other a short time," he continued. "And I know I am just a cowboy trying to make a living in rough country, but I want you to know that I see you, the real you. And everything I see makes me want to know more." Bianca turned her hand to clasp his properly, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. "I see you too," she said. "You are not just anything, Lucas Irving. You are the first person in this country who has treated me like I matter." They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined across the kitchen table, something profound and fragile forming between them. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows, but inside, Bianca felt warm for the first time since arriving in Idaho. The romance between them developed slowly over the following weeks, built on shared meals and long conversations and the simple comfort of each other's presence. Lucas taught Bianca about the rhythms of ranch life, the signs of changing weather in the mountains, the best places to fish in the nearby creeks. Bianca shared her knowledge of herbs and cooking, teaching him French words that made him laugh with his terrible pronunciation, telling him stories of her childhood that she had never shared with anyone. They stole moments when they could. A walk through the frost-covered meadow behind her property, a ride in his wagon to a neighboring town where Bianca needed to purchase supplies not available in Wallace. An afternoon spent repairing the fence around her herb garden, working side by side in companionable silence. And slowly, the relationship shifted from friendship to something deeper. It happened in small ways. The brush of his hand against hers that lingered a moment longer than necessary, the way her heart raced when she heard his boots on the porch, the softness in his eyes when he looked at her, the way she caught herself thinking about him at odd moments throughout the day. Their first kiss came on a cold December evening. Lucas had stayed late helping her repair a broken window shutter, and when the work was done, they stood together on her porch watching snow begin to fall. The town was quiet, lights glowing in windows, smoke rising from chimneys. "It is beautiful," Bianca said softly. "Different from home, but beautiful." "You still miss France?" Lucas asked. "Sometimes. I miss the way the light looked on the mountains in the evening. I miss my mother's voice. I miss feeling like I belonged somewhere." She glanced at him. "But I am starting to build new things to miss if I had to leave here." "You are not planning to leave, are you?" "No, but life is unpredictable." Lucas turned to face her fully, snowflakes catching in his hair and on his shoulders. "Bianca, I need you to know something. I am not good with fancy words or romantic gestures. I am just a man who works hard and tries to do right by people. But you have become important to me. Very important." Bianca's breath caught. "You have become important to me as well. I know folks in town have not made this easy for you. I know being seen with me has probably made some of that worse. But I do not want to stop seeing you. I do not want to hide what I feel." "What do you feel?" Bianca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering with words, Lucas cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her. It was a soft kiss, tentative and sweet, asking rather than demanding. Bianca melted into it, her hands coming up to grip his vest, anchoring herself against the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I feel that," he said simply. Bianca laughed, a bit breathless, a bit giddy. "Yes, I feel it too." They stood there in the falling snow, holding each other close, and Bianca felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for as long as she could remember. She had found her place, her person, her home, but of course, things could not be that simple. Constance Miller, true to form, did not take the news of Lucas and Bianca's courtship well. She began spreading rumors around town, vicious ones about Bianca's morals and motives. "She is just after his land," Bianca overheard at the mercantile. "Everyone knows those European women are calculating. She probably has a husband back in France. I heard she was run out of her village for scandalous behavior." Another voice chimed in. The rumors grew more elaborate and more cruel as winter deepened. Bianca tried to ignore them, but it was hard when she could feel the judgment in every glance, hear the whispers that followed her down the street. Her boarding house suffered too. 2 of her tenants moved out, claiming they could not stay in an establishment run by a woman of questionable character. New boarders were hard to come by when half the town believed she was a schemer or worse. Lucas was furious when he found out. "I should confront Constance, make her stop spreading lies." "That will only make it worse," Bianca said wearily. They were sitting in her kitchen, where she had just served him a dinner she barely had the heart to cook. "She will claim you are defending me because I have ensnared you somehow. It will feed into her narrative. So we do nothing. We let her destroy your reputation. We live our lives with integrity. Eventually, people will see the truth." And if they do not, Bianca had no answer for that. She was trying to be optimistic, but the constant hostility was wearing her down. She had thought things would get better with time, that people would accept her once they saw she was no threat. Instead, they seemed more determined than ever to drive her out. The situation came to a head just before Christmas. Bianca had placed an order for supplies at the general store, as she did every week, but when she arrived to pick them up, the proprietor refused to fill it. "I cannot serve you any more," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I've got to think about my business. Certain customers have made it clear they will not shop here if I continue to do business with you." Bianca felt as if she had been slapped. "You are refusing to sell me food." "I am sorry, Miss Laurent. It is just business." "It is discrimination," Bianca said, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. "I have done nothing wrong. I pay my bills on time. I cause no trouble. And you are going to let those petty women decide who you will serve. Now see here," the proprietor blustered. "You are the one causing problems, coming here with your foreign ways, stirring up trouble." "I am stirring up trouble. I have kept my head down and worked hard and tried to fit in. I have endured insults and mockery and rumors, and now you are telling me I cannot even buy food." Several other customers had stopped to watch the confrontation. Bianca saw Constance Miller among them, a satisfied smile on her face. "Maybe you should go back where you came from," Constance said sweetly. "If you are not wanted here, why stay?" Before Bianca could respond, the door to the mercantile swung open hard enough to bang against the wall. Lucas stood in the doorway, his face dark with anger. "I just heard," he said, crossing to Bianca's side in 3 long strides. "Is it true? You are refusing to sell to her?" The proprietor swallowed hard. Lucas might not be the biggest man in Wallace, but he had a reputation for being fair and honest, and people respected that. "Mr. Irving, you have got to understand my position." "I understand perfectly. You are letting a handful of gossips dictate your business practices, and in the process, you are violating every principle of decency and fair dealing." Lucas's voice was cold, controlled, more frightening than if he had shouted. "You are also losing my business. I will take my custom elsewhere from now on." "Now hold on," the proprietor said, alarmed. Lucas was one of his best customers, paying cash for large orders every month. "There is no need for that. There is every need. If you will not serve Miss Laurent, you will not serve me. It is that simple." "You would damage your own interests for a foreigner." "I would stand up for what is right," Lucas corrected. "And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." He put his hand on the small of Bianca's back, a protective gesture that was also a public claiming. "Come on, Bianca, we will find somewhere else to do business." They walked out together, leaving a stunned silence behind them. Once they were outside, Bianca let out a shaky breath. "You did not have to do that," she said. "You need that store as much as I do. There are other stores." "And I meant what I said. I will not stand by and watch them treat you this way. Lucas, you are going to ruin your standing in this community for me." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Bianca, you are not listening. I do not care about my standing in this community if it requires me to turn my back on someone I love." The world seemed to stop. "What did you say?" "I love you," Lucas said simply. "I have been falling in love with you since the day we met, and I am tired of pretending otherwise. I love your strength and your courage and the way you refuse to let them break you. I love your accent and your different way of seeing things. I love how you sing while you cook, and the way you tend your herb garden like each plant is precious. I love everything about you, and I am not going to let this town make you feel like you have to hide or apologize for who you are." Tears spilled down Bianca's cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "So much it frightens me sometimes." "Do not be frightened," Lucas said, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "We will figure this out together." They stood on the street, holding each other close, and Bianca did not care who saw or what they said. She had found something rare and precious, and she was not going to let fear take it from her. The next few days were difficult. The proprietor's refusal to serve Bianca became common knowledge, and other businesses began to follow suit. The butcher claimed he was out of stock whenever she entered. The baker said he could not take her order. Even the church, which had always been neutral ground, became uncomfortable when the minister's wife stopped inviting her to social events. But something else began to happen too. There were people in Wallace, quieter voices that had been drowned out by the louder ones, who were disgusted by what they saw. Mrs. Henderson, the minister's wife, defied her husband and continued to invite Bianca to her home for tea. A few of the miners who had boarded with Bianca spoke up in her defense at the saloon, saying she was honest and hardworking. And Lucas, true to his word, made it known that anyone who insulted Bianca would answer to him. One evening in mid-January, there was a knock on Bianca's door. She opened it to find an older couple she recognized from church services but had never spoken to. "Miss Laurent," the man said, removing his hat. "My name is Henry Abbott, and this is my wife Clara. We run a farm about 5 miles outside of town. We heard about your troubles at the mercantile." "Oh," Bianca said, unsure where this was going. "Please come in." They sat in her parlor, Clara perched on the edge of the sofa while Henry twisted his hat in his hands. "We want to apologize," Clara said. "We have been coming to Wallace for supplies for years, and we never thought much about the gossip and meanness. We just ignored it, figured it was not our business." But what is happening to you is not right, Henry continued. You should not be refused service because of where you are from or how you talk. It is not Christian and it is not decent. We would like to help, Clara said. We can sell you eggs, milk, butter, whatever you need from the farm. And Henry can introduce you to some of the other farmers and ranchers in the area who do not come into Wallace much. Good folks who will judge you on your character, not your accent. Bianca felt tears prick her eyes again. She seemed to cry so easily these days, overwhelmed by both cruelty and kindness. Thank you, she managed. You do not know what this means to me. We have a pretty good idea, Henry said gently. Clara's family came from Germany when she was a girl. She remembers what it is like to be the outsider. Clara reached over and patted Bianca's hand. It gets better. Not quickly and not easily, but it gets better. True to their word, the Abbotts introduced Bianca to a network of farmers and ranchers who lived outside Wallace proper. These people were less concerned with town politics and more interested in practical matters, who worked hard, who paid their bills, who could be trusted. Bianca found a new customer base among them. People who were happy to board in town when they needed to do business in Wallace and did not care about her accent. Lucas helped too, spreading word among his fellow cattlemen that Bianca's boarding house offered good food and clean rooms. By February, her business was recovering, no longer dependent on the approval of Wallace's small-minded elite. But the sweetest victory came in March, when the general store proprietor approached Bianca on the street, hat in hand. "Miss Laurent," he said awkwardly, "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you. It was wrong, and I have lost good customers because of it. I was hoping we could come to an understanding. I will serve you like any other customer, and maybe you could mention to some of your new contacts that my prices are fair." Bianca looked at him for a long moment, weighing her options. Part of her wanted to refuse, to make him feel the same rejection he had inflicted on her. But that was not who she wanted to be. "I will shop at your store when it is convenient," she said carefully. "And I will tell people you sell quality goods, but I will not forget what happened. Trust is earned, monsieur. You will have to earn mine back." The proprietor nodded, accepting the rebuke. "That is fair. Thank you, Miss Laurent." As winter gave way to spring, Bianca's life in Wallace became more stable. She had her business, her network of supportive friends, and most importantly, she had Lucas. Their relationship deepened as the months passed, moving from courtship to something more serious and committed. Lucas proposed on a warm evening in May, taking her for a ride up into the hills where wildflowers carpeted the meadows and the setting sun painted the mountains gold. They dismounted near a creek, and Lucas spread a blanket on the ground. "I have been thinking about the future," he said without preamble as they sat watching the water ripple over stones. "My ranch is doing well enough that I could support a family. The house needs work, but it has good bones." Bianca's heart began to race. "Lucas." He turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "I know we come from different worlds. I know there will always be people who think we do not belong together. But I also know that I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to build something lasting with you, Bianca. I want children who speak French and English, who know how to work a ranch and cook your mother's recipes. I want a life with you." "Is this a proposal?" Bianca asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "It is if you say yes," Lucas replied, pulling a simple gold band from his pocket. "I am not a rich man, and I cannot promise you an easy life, but I can promise you will be loved every day, respected always, and never alone again. Bianca Laurent, will you marry me?" "Yes," Bianca said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." Lucas slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and commitment into the embrace. When they finally pulled apart, Both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "You have made me the happiest man in Idaho," he murmured. "And you have given me a home," Bianca replied. "A real home, not just a place but a person. You sound like home to me too, Lucas." They married in June, a small ceremony at the church with Mrs. Henderson and the abbot standing as witnesses. Not everyone in Wallace attended, Constance Miller notably absent, but the people who mattered were there. After the ceremony, they held a reception at Bianca's boarding house, which she would continue to run with Lucas's help. The wedding night was spent at Lucas's ranch, the house they would share. It was rustic but charming, with views of the mountains and a creek running through the property. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies and rhythms, whispering promises in the darkness. Life settled into new patterns after the wedding. Bianca divided her time between the boarding house, which she hired a local widow to help manage, and the ranch, where she learned the skills of frontier living. Lucas taught her to ride properly, to read weather signs, to mend fences and doctor sick cattle. She taught him to appreciate subtle flavors in cooking, to speak a few words of French, to see beauty in things he had always taken for granted. They worked hard, but they were happy. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Bianca's business sense helped Lucas make smarter decisions about when to sell cattle and how to invest their profits. His practical knowledge helped her understand the rhythms of the land and how to make the most of what they had. Their first child, a son they named Louis, was born in the spring of 1884. He had his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair, and he was beloved beyond measure. Bianca had worried during the pregnancy about bringing a child into a world where he might face prejudice for having a foreign mother, but Lucas was adamant. "Our son will be raised to be proud of both sides of his heritage," he said firmly. "He will know his mother is a woman of courage and strength, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me." Louis was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Marguerite, who had Bianca's features and Lucas's stubbornness. The house that had once seemed too large for just 2 people suddenly felt perfectly sized, filled with the noise and chaos of children. Bianca taught her children French alongside English, sang them the songs her mother had taught her, told them stories of the Alps and the small village where she had grown up. Lucas taught them to ride and rope, to respect the land and the animals, to judge people by their actions rather than their origins. As the children grew, something interesting happened in Wallace. The town was changing, evolving beyond the rough mining camp it had been when Bianca first arrived. New families were moving in, bringing diverse backgrounds and perspectives. The old guard, represented by people like Constance Miller, found their influence waning. Bianca, through her hard work and integrity, had become a respected figure. Her boarding house was known throughout the region for its quality and fair prices. Her children were well-behaved and well-educated. Her marriage to Lucas was clearly strong and loving. It became harder and harder for even her critics to maintain that she was somehow a corrupting foreign influence. Constance Miller eventually married a banker from Spokane and moved away, her departure barely remarked upon. The new generation of Wallace residents, many of whom had themselves come from other places, had no patience for the old prejudices. By 1890, Bianca had lived in Wallace for 8 years. She spoke English fluently now, though she retained her accent, something she no longer tried to hide. It was part of who she was, a reminder of the journey she had made and the courage it had required. One evening, sitting on the porch of their ranch house while Louis and Marguerite played in the yard and the summer sun set behind the mountains, Lucas took her hand. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Leaving France, coming here, everything you went through?" Bianca considered the question seriously. She thought about the hunger and poverty of her childhood, the terrifying journey across the ocean, the loneliness of her first months in America, the cruelty of people who could not see past her differences. But she also thought about this man beside her, the love they had built together. She thought about her children, healthy and happy, with opportunities she never could have dreamed of in her village. She thought about the business she had created, the respect she had earned, the life she had made through sheer determination and hard work. "No," she said finally, "I do not regret it. Everything I endured led me here to this moment, to this life. How could I regret that?" Lucas raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are the strongest person I know." "I am strong because I had to be," Bianca said, "but I am happy because of you." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play, and Bianca felt a deep sense of peace. She had found her home, not in a place but in a person and a life they had built together. The girl who had stepped off the stagecoach 8 years ago, frightened and alone, had become a woman of substance and strength. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. A third child, another son named Thomas, arrived in 1891. The ranch expanded, adding more land and cattle. The boarding house remained profitable, eventually being sold to the widow who had been helping manage it, giving Bianca more time to focus on her family. Louis grew into a young man who spoke both French and English with equal fluency, who could work cattle as well as his father and cook his mother's recipes. Marguerite became a spirited girl who loved the mountains and horses and had her mother's determination. Thomas was still young, but he showed signs of combining the best traits of both his parents. Lucas's hair began to show silver at the temples, and Bianca found a few gray strands in her own dark hair. They were no longer the young couple who had fallen in love over kitchen table dinners, but they were something better. Partners who had weathered storms together and emerged stronger. One afternoon in 1895, now 13 years after Bianca's arrival in Wallace, she was in town purchasing supplies with Marguerite when she noticed a young woman standing by the stagecoach looking lost and frightened. The woman had olive skin and dark eyes, and when she spoke to the driver, her accent was clearly Italian. Bianca felt a jolt of recognition, seeing herself in that young woman's uncertain stance, her cheap but carefully maintained clothes, her brave attempt to hide her fear. "Excuse me," Bianca said in English, approaching with Marguerite at her side. "Are you new to Wallace? Can I help you find something?" The young woman turned, relief washing over her face at the offer of help. "Yes, please. I am looking for the boarding house on Cedar Street. I am told there might be work there." "I used to run that establishment," Bianca said warmly. "Mrs. Henderson owns it now and she is a good woman. I can take you there if you like." "You are very kind," the woman said, her accent thick but her English understandable. "I am Maria Rossi. I came from New York, before that from Italy." "I am Bianca Irving," she replied, deliberately using her married name. "I came from France many years ago. I know what it is like to be new and different in a place like this." Maria's eyes widened. "You are French, but you are so respected." Everyone spoke of Mrs. Irving as an important person in the community. Bianca smiled. "It was not always so, but that is a long story. Come, let me take you to Mrs. Henderson. And Maria, if anyone gives you trouble for being Italian or for your accent, you come find me." Things have changed in Wallace, but some lessons are worth remembering. As they walked through town, Marguerite chattering away in her mix of French and English, pointing out important buildings, Bianca felt the circle closing. She had been that frightened immigrant once. Now she was in a position to help someone else traveling the same difficult path. She introduced Maria to Mrs. Henderson, who agreed to give the young woman a trial period at the boarding house. As they were leaving, Maria caught Bianca's hand. "Thank you," she said with feeling. "You made me feel less alone." "You are not alone," Bianca assured her. "This country can be hard, but it can also be good. You just have to be strong enough to weather the storms." That evening, Bianca told Lucas about the encounter. They were in bed, the house quiet around them, the children asleep in their rooms. "I saw myself in her," Bianca said softly. "That same fear and determination." "You helped her," Lucas said, pulling her closer. "Just like you will help other newcomers who face the same struggles." "That is who you are, Bianca. You remember where you came from and you use that to lift others up." "We have built something good here," Bianca mused. "Not just for ourselves, but for our children and maybe for others who come after." "We have," Lucas agreed. "And it started because I heard you speak and recognized something true. You still sound like home to me, every single day." Bianca turned in his arms to kiss him, this man who had seen her value when others only saw her differences, who had stood by her through prejudice and hardship, who had built a life with her that surpassed anything she had dared to dream. The years that followed were good ones. Maria Rossi became a friend, eventually marrying a miner and starting her own family. Louis went to college in Spokane, then returned to help expand the family ranch. Marguerite showed a talent for teaching and began working at the schoolhouse in Wallace. Thomas was still finding his way, but he was young yet. Lucas and Bianca grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched their children grow and have families of their own. Louis married a teacher from Boys and gave them 2 grandchildren. Marguerite wed a doctor and had 3. Thomas eventually married Maria Rossi's daughter in a beautiful ceremony that blended French, Italian, and American traditions. The boarding house Bianca had inherited all those years ago was eventually torn down to make way for a new hotel, but the legacy remained. She had proven that someone foreign, someone different, could thrive in the American West. She had carved out a place for herself through hard work and integrity, and in doing so, she had made it easier for those who came after. In 1910, Lucas and Bianca celebrated 25 years of marriage with a party attended by half the town. They stood together, surrounded by children and grandchildren and friends, and Bianca marveled at the strange and wonderful path her life had taken. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, his arm around her waist, his hair now completely silver but his eyes still the same pale blue that had captivated her decades ago. "I am thinking about that day I arrived in Wallace," Bianca said. "I was so frightened, so alone, I never imagined all of this." "I am glad you stayed," Lucas said simply. "I am glad you saw past my accent and my foreign ways to who I really was." "I saw you because you were worth seeing," Lucas corrected gently. "And I am grateful every day that you let me into your life." They danced together as a small band played, moving easily despite their age, comfortable in each other's arms after so many years. Their children watched with affection, knowing their parents' story, proud of the courage and love that had founded their family. When the party finally ended and they returned home to their ranch, walking slowly under the starlit sky, Bianca felt complete in a way she never had as a young woman. She had found her place, her purpose, her people. "You remember what you said to me that day in the snow?" Bianca asked as they reached their porch. "When you first kissed me." "I said a lot of things that day," Lucas replied with a smile. "You said I sounded like home, that my voice, my accent, all the things others mocked me for, they sounded like home to you. I remember, it is still true." "You sound like home to me too," Bianca said, reaching up to cup his weathered face. "You always have. From that very first day when you defended me at the church social, you were my home. They went inside together, to the house they had filled with love and laughter, to the bed they had shared for 25 years, to the life they had built against all odds. And as Bianca fell asleep in her husband's arms, she knew that every struggle, every moment of fear and doubt, every instance of cruelty she had endured had been worth it. She had crossed an ocean and half a continent. She had faced prejudice and poverty. She had been mocked for her accent and her foreign ways. But she had also found love, built a family, created a legacy. She had proven that home was not a place you were born, but a place you chose, a person you loved, a life you created with courage and determination. The girl from the small French village had become a woman of the American West, respected and loved, surrounded by family and friends. And it had all begun with a cowboy who heard her speak and recognized something precious, something worth defending, something that sounded like home. As the years continued to roll forward, Bianca and Lucas aged gracefully, their love a constant in a changing world. They saw Wallace transform from a rough mining town into a proper city with paved streets and electric lights. They saw their children achieve success in their chosen paths. They saw their grandchildren grow and begin families of their own. In 1918, when Bianca was 58 years old and Lucas 61, they sat together on their porch on a warm summer evening, much as they had done countless times before. But this time, they were reflecting on more than just their own lives. "We have been married 33 years, Lucas said, his hand finding hers with the easy familiarity of long practice. 33 good years, Bianca agreed. Her accent was still present, softer now but unmistakable, a permanent part of her voice that she no longer tried to minimize. "We have 7 grandchildren, a successful ranch, and more friends than we can count. We have done well, my love." "We have," Bianca said contentedly. "Sometimes I think about that girl who stepped off the stagecoach, so frightened and alone. I wish I could tell her that everything would turn out better than she could imagine. She was brave enough to make the journey. She would have been proud of who you became." "Who we became," Bianca corrected. "I could not have done any of it without you." Lucas raised her hand to his lips, a gesture he had repeated thousands of times over their decades together, but one that never lost its sweetness. "We were lucky to find each other." "It was more than luck," Bianca said. "It was you having the courage to see past what others saw, to hear home in a voice that sounded foreign to everyone else." Their oldest grandson, Louis's son Henry, came running up to the porch then, full of excitement about a calf that had been born that afternoon. Bianca listened to his animated description, marveling at how naturally he switched between French and English, how comfortable he was with his mixed heritage in a way she never could have been at his age. This was her legacy, she realized. Not just the ranch or the business success, but these children who grew up knowing they could be both French and American, who saw diversity as strength rather than weakness, who would carry forward the lessons of courage and acceptance that she and Lucas had worked so hard to teach. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Bianca felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her journey from that small village in France to this ranch in Idaho had been long and often difficult, but it had led her exactly where she needed to be. She was home. She had always been home, from the moment a cowboy with kind eyes heard her speak and told her she sounded like home. And that home had grown and expanded to encompass not just one person or one place, but an entire family, a community, a life rich with meaning and love. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, reading her expression as he had learned to do over their decades together. "I am thinking that I am grateful," Bianca said simply, "for all of it, the struggles and the triumphs, the pain and the joy. It all led me here to this moment with you." "I am grateful too," Lucas said softly. Every day. They sat together as darkness fell, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Idaho sky, their hands clasped, their lives intertwined, their love as strong at 60 as it had been at 25. And in that moment, Bianca knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just a home, but the one place and person where she truly belonged. The story of the French immigrant who was mocked for her accent and the cowboy who defended her became a family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It became a reminder that love could bridge any divide, that home was something you built rather than something you were born into, and that the courage to be yourself in the face of prejudice was one of the greatest strengths a person could possess. Bianca and Lucas lived into their 80s, always together, always in love, always grateful for the chance encounter that had changed both their lives. When Lucas passed away in 1929, Bianca mourned deeply, but took comfort in knowing they had lived a full life together, had created something lasting and beautiful. She followed him 2 years later, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, her last words a mixture of French and English, a perfect embodiment of the life she had lived. Her family buried her next to Lucas on a hillside overlooking their ranch, the mountains she had loved visible in the distance, the land they had worked together spread out below. On her headstone, at the request of her children, they inscribed a simple phrase that captured the essence of her love story. She sounded like home, and indeed she had, to the cowboy who loved her, to the family she created, to all those who knew her courage and strength. Bianca Laurent Irving had traveled far from her birthplace, had faced prejudice and hardship, but had ultimately triumphed through love, determination, and the unwavering support of a man who saw her true worth. Her legacy lived on in her descendants, in the acceptance and diversity of the community she had helped shape, and in the timeless truth that home is not where you are from but where you are loved, where you are valued, where you finally, truly belong. From the frightened immigrant mocked for her foreign ways to the matriarch of a thriving family, Bianca's journey was a testament to the power of courage, love, and the simple act of seeing someone's true worth beyond surface differences. The ranch that Lucas and Bianca built together remained in the family for generations, a physical reminder of what two people could accomplish when they chose to build something together despite the obstacles in their path. The town of Wallace, Idaho grew and changed, but the story of Bianca and Lucas remained, a cherished piece of local history that inspired others to look beyond accents and origins to see the person beneath. And on quiet summer evenings, when the mountains turned gold in the setting sun and the air was filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers, it was said you could almost hear them still. The French immigrant and her cowboy, talking and laughing together, their voices blending in perfect harmony, each one sounding like home to the other, forever and always.